All right, what is going on, people? It is good to have you back on board. Another episode of Unfiltered coming your way right here, right now. This one officially will go down in the books. This is episode number 322. On your scorecards, you can get involved 24/7, 365. It is easy. Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts, YouTube as well. If you're on YouTube, just search Unfiltered with Casey Stern. You can also get us on all the socials. Hit me up at Casey Stern, X or Twitter. You can get me over on Instagram, Unfiltered with Casey Stern, Facebook, Casey Stern. However you want to, you can, as we roll here in another episode of Unfiltered. And thank you for being on board. A ton to get to here on this show. We'll bounce around Major League Baseball as we hit the home stretch last couple of weeks. 12, 13 games left for pretty much all of the particulars and contenders and pretenders alike. And we'll also hit the NFL. Week 2 outside of Monday Night Football as I do this. Pretty much in the books, and we'll focus on quarterbacks and some of the performances through the first couple of weeks of the NFL season. You can always perform and jump on board. Comment on the YouTube side, and I'll hit you back and get right to you. And you can do the same anytime on Twitter, X at Casey Stern. Happy to be with you and to communicate. So let's do so about some baseball. Let's start with the Mets. Pete Alonso's home run last year in the wild card series against the Brewers in Game 3. Clearly, obviously, on the brink against Devin Williams. And now what? Everybody else has homered off him since then, but the big homers saved the season, and the Mets went on their way. They beat Philadelphia. You know the drill by now. Get to the NLCS, losing 6 games against the Dodgers. Well, this year, another home run from Pete Alonso seemingly saves the season. This one not down to the last out and the last strike, but it could have been, and it might as well have been. 8 losses deep. Facing 9 in a row, which have been in the longest losing streak since 2004, where they lost 11 in a row. Last time they lost as many as 8 was in 2018. He hits the big home run. They avoid the 9-game losing skid. They get a day off before this big Padres series, which affects both particulars, certainly, because remember, San Diego, if you're a fan of the Pods, not just battling now in that wild card positioning where they are second in that 2-hole, but they're only 2.5 out of the National League Western Division. That Alonso homer, huge. Deep breath for the Mets is real and spectacular, to quote Seinfeld. However, not spectacular, the pitching. Yeah, the hitting has hit the doldrums over the last couple of weeks outside of Juan Soto. That's a big thing. Needing a Lindor bunt a couple of days ago to try and spark a late rally, which didn't end up mattering as much as it should have. You know, not getting Nimmo until the home run he hit in this most recent win, having an extra base hit in all of September. But it's been the pitching. It's been the fact that they've needed to rely on the offense to score 6-7 runs a game as it was for a period of time because they haven't had any pitching outside of Nolan McLean, who through 6 starts is a 1.16 ERA or whatever it is, and he has been brilliant. Dude's a stud. But what accentuates the Jonah Tong giving up 6 runs in 2/3 of an inning against the Rangers in this series, what accentuates all of it is the fact that you are relying on 3 kids, and he and Sproat and McLean, to get it done, which is difficult to do. Clay Holmes will open this series, but we don't know. Will Minaya piggyback? Will he get a start? Does Tom get another start? Do we see a revisiting of Senga? How does the rotation work out? Forget about in the postseason. Everybody talking about, even I was, a week or 2 ago, when the lead was 5.5, about how they'd set up game 1 and game 2 and game 3. Now, all hands on deck. And by the way, you can't trust anyone in the bullpen either if you're a Met fan. So what the heck are they going to do? Do they deserve to make the postseason? No. Are they good enough to make the postseason in this landscape? Yeah. All right, can you make an argument they're a better team than the Giants and the Reds and the Cardinals and the Diamondbacks? They should be. They haven't been since the middle of June, but they can be in a 12-day stretch, and they should be. Now, the Giants in this mix, Buster Posey pushing the chips in. Bryce Eldridge, their number 1 prospect, 13th prospect overall in Major League Baseball. Hulking 6'7" first baseman, left-handed hitter. He will come up. He's been called up, and they will take their shot. They'll try and get their infusion of energy, like Drew Gilbert, speaking of the Mets, and that trade has given them, like the Mets have gotten from McLean and Sproat and Tong, and get it in their form with Dominic Smith, former Met, now out for the rest of at least the regular season with an injury. Now they'll get Eldridge, and he'll get a chance to play and to make an impact on the Giants, who clearly it seems can't pitch enough. But the lineup needed a bolt and a jolt, and now it will possibly get it from some youth. The Dodgers, for all that they can't do, Let's talk about what they can. That's pitch. Blake Snell going as I speak tonight. Glasnow off the last performance. Yamamoto near no-hit bid, which should have been at least an easy win against the Orioles less than a week ago. What was the problem? The bullpen. And that has been a major problem for the Dodgers. When they get leads, can they hold them? The inefficiency of the offense. Because even with the names, you look at the back of the baseball card, and the Dodgers should have no issue. But the thing that is frustrating if you're an LA fan is just how good they should be and how good they're capable of being and how inconsistent they truly are. And that was the story of Aaron Nola most of the year. But some real signs in the Mets start and in his most recent one about the stuff, the ability to spot the breaking ball, the way we know he does so well with that hook when he's effective. And it all is set up by his efficiency with the fastball and his accuracy. And it's been way better, getting ahead in counts, doing the things Nola needs to do. They need him in the rotation because when you're going in with just three lefties, and we know what Ranger Suarez has been in the postseason, Ranger Suarez is a dude in the postseason. We've seen him 3-4 innings out of the bullpen, dominant. We've seen him starting, deciding game 5s and 7s and be dominant. We know how good he is. But what are you getting out of Christian Sanchez in those spots? Do you really trust Jesus Luzardo in those spots? Because I don't. To have Nola going to be important. We know what Duran has done. And even with the lack of Alvarado down in that pen, think about it. If you don't need to start Luzardo and you could use the other three and Nola as a right-hander, maybe Luzardo becomes a lefty you could use earlier in the game out of the bullpen. But Rob Thompson has a lot of choices and decisions to make, even without Zach Wheeler on the team. Excuse me, the Phillies clearly are a team and a force to be reckoned with. Outskirts of town in the National League, the Cincinnati Reds coming up being swept by the A's. Terry Francona having a meeting, a team meeting, and that's not something I know, and covering him when he was with Boston, and I was there. He is not a team meeting guy, but he had one. Now we'll see what happens because they're going to St. Louis in a series where they've got to win. And look, the Cardinals are still in this too, and the Diamondbacks, because the Mets have brought everybody back to the dance. American League, they're dancing in the West. The Rangers, fresh off 2 out of 3 against the Mets, go to Houston to play 3 in a big series. And Bruce Bochy has the little rascals and engines that could with these Rangers. No Eovaldi, no Seager, no Semien, right in the mix. With opportunity knocking at the door. And it's knocking at the door right now in New York for Jose Caminero at shortstop because Anthony Volpe may be back and healthy, but he off the reservation. 19 errors, 661 OPS. We know all the things that have gone wrong. And clearly it seems like that ship has sailed and sunk like the Titanic. But now you got Jazz Chisholm, he of the 30-30, and congratulations, saying that the Yankees are the best team in baseball. Are they the best team in baseball? Well, not if they don't get more pitching and pitching depth. Will Warren give up 6 runs in that finale against the Red Sox. He's pitched 30 starts this year. The only one outside of, really the front end of that staff that has been able to do that, out of Fried and out of Rodon. They need him to be better. They need these kids to help back up at the back of that rotation and give them good performances. And they need to trust the bullpen. So there is a lot going on. Speaking of which, now the trust may be back for Aroldis Chapman and for Alex Cora, and company, as after a couple of iffy outings for the All-Star in the year he's had, he returned to being the older Aroldis Chapman he can't trust, but was able to close it out in the finale against the Yankees. Dogs and cats living together, mass baseball hysteria, a lot more unfiltered coming up in the next couple weeks and all of that. But chime in, Twitter at Casey Stern. Let me know. Comments on the YouTube channel. Let's get to the National Football League. Joe Burrow. Feel for this guy. We always talk about Mahomes. We talk about Lamar Jackson. We talk about Josh Allen. And there's a fourth guy. It's your Mount Rushmore of current. There's a fourth guy. And it's Joe Burrow, even though he never gets the credit for that. And we know about the start they had of the year last year. Well, now the Bengals start 2-0, and Burrow not going to be there for 3 months with the turf toe and the surgery and whatnot. That is a tough hit for the Bengals. Maybe not as tough for the Vikings here. J.J. McCarthy will be out with an ankle injury next 2, 3, 4 weeks. Whatever it's going to be, we'll see. Timetable TBD. But here's what's not. For all the perseverance in the opening week and everything he did on national TV and the comeback and the fact that Jefferson and everybody believed in him and he had the big fourth quarter. And look, I like J.J. McCarthy, a lot of moxie. You watch him play at Michigan and you feel like he's certainly a winner. Maybe not the tools of a lot of these guys, maybe not the tools of a 10th overall pick, even though he was the 5th, 6th quarterback in that 10 a couple years ago. Penix going 8. right? But we know that he's a winner, and he showed that in the first week. Unfortunately, what he hasn't shown, the ability to release the football quickly, which, by the way, Penix can do. McCarthy holding on to way too long, not finding guys, not getting Jefferson and Hockenson involved, issues. Now he'll miss a couple of weeks. How about the Joneses? Love these stories. Mac Jones dealing with San Francisco with Purdy out. How about Daniel Jones in Indianapolis? Look, I'm not a Daniel Jones apologist. I never thought he was great. He had one great game. He had his Kerry Collins against the Minnesota Vikings 41-0 game when he beat the Vikings and Kirk Cousins in a game in the playoffs a couple of years ago before he got just completely flattened out by the Eagles. But he's a competitor, and he's a class guy. And I root for him, and I'm happy for him. Now, MVP through 2 weeks of the season or whatever he is, and all that he's done and all the yards. And, he probably shouldn't have had a chance to win that game. Denver kind of let the Colts swoop in and take it and steal it, right? Defeat from the jaws of victory on the Denver side. But you got to love what Daniel Jones has done if you're a Giants fan and you followed his career because he's a class guy. Is he this good? No. Is he as bad as he's looked at times? No. If you protect him with an actual offensive line and you leave him opportunities where he could choose whether anyone wants to run, he doesn't have to go through progressions that fast, think as quickly, then yes, he can do a decent enough job. But I think warts will be shown. Speaking of the Giants, all the warts were about how they were handling Jackson Dart, not even letting him take an interview after the first week, because you know what all the questions are going to be. No, they can't do that. They shouldn't have done that. But you know what the questions are going to be? They're all going to be about whether or not Dart thinks he should start, or is he ready to play, or they're trying to create all the controversy. Russell Wilson throws for 450 yards and then turns back into a pumpkin after midnight with the pick at the end that cost them. You get them at all the long field goals you want. Giants should have won that football game. Soft defense from Bowen. I'm focusing on quarterbacks, so stay away from that. It is what it is. But Wilson performed well. And now, it buys you some time. It buys you time if you're Brian Daboll to not have to hear about Dart at least for a week or two. But is it a good thing to not have Dart in there learning on the fly? Is it a good thing to not let him take his licks, take his wounds, and go through a bad season, which the Giants are going to have anyway? It's not a good team. I've picked them to win 5 games before the season. I think it's probably about what they'll win. They're certainly not going to win the third week because they got a pissed-off Kansas City. It's like a little Giants. That's not a girl. That's my niece Becky, Icebox, and she's pissed. Kansas City and Mahomes down 0-2, now coming in to MetLife to face the Giants Sunday Night Football next week. And how about Mahomes? I think he's enjoying, looks like he's almost kind of, enjoying is a strong word. But, for him, he's taking this as the challenge. This team wins all the time. They were talking about how bad they were last year, and they're like 14-1, and everybody's still complaining. Now 0-2, Kelsey not performing, right? Except in his podcasts. Injuries, Worthy who was out, and you got Rashee Rice with his issues, and a lack of weapons, and all this other stuff. And now Mahomes got to really drill down and figure it out with Andy Reid. Expect them to do that on Sunday night. The way the Lions did when they bounced back in this past week. Jared Goff, terrific. Dan Campbell and company making a statement. They put 51 points up on the Bears. And after the rough loss opening week, where everybody wanted a fraud check, the Lions this year, they bounced back. The quarterbacks, always under pressure, always under the microscope. Question for you, Twitter at Casey Stern, YouTube in the comments. What quarterback has been the most surprising to the positive side for you through 2 weeks? And the most disappointing over the first couple of weeks for you on the negative side? Give me your thoughts. I'll continue to give me mine when we next return for Unfiltered. But 322 is in the books. We'll see you next time.